There is a deceptive, sterile safety in the late-night glare of a commercial laundromat. When you stand beneath the harsh, buzzing hum of 30 fluorescent tubes at 3 in the morning, the rest of the world feels entirely locked out. You are surrounded by the rhythmic, mechanical sloshing of industrial washing machines, the comforting, dry heat radiating from the massive glass-doored dryers, and the overwhelming, artificial scent of lavender detergent and hot dryer sheets. It is a modern, self-cleaning sanctuary, a brightly lit island of domestic routine surrounded by the dark, empty streets of the sleeping city.
But when the power dies and you are forced to descend into the damp, hand-carved stone basement beneath the concrete floor of Spin Cycle Express, that sterile sanctuary can quickly dissolve into a subterranean tomb. My name is Lucas Thompson. I am an independent commercial electrician and maintenance contractor. Because busy properties cannot afford to shut down during normal business hours, I spend my nights working in empty buildings, repairing faulty wiring, clearing out industrial drainage lines, and updating outdated breaker systems. I prefer the quiet of the graveyard shift to the chaotic noise of daytime service calls. But tonight, the oppressive heat of the summer storm outside had made the air inside the laundromat feel incredibly heavy.
I had been hired by the building's property manager to diagnose a recurring electrical fault that was causing the main row of commercial washing machines to short-circuit during high-capacity spin cycles. The job required me to inspect the building's primary wiring harness and update the digital diagnostics log. I sat at a plastic folding table in the corner of the brightly lit main floor, my laptop screen casting a cold blue glow over the diagnostic interface. The software running on my screen was labeled Laundromat Administrative Portal.
I adjusted the collar of my shirt, wiping a bead of sweat from my neck. For the last 2 hours, I had been fighting off a sudden, aggressive fever. My skin felt clammy and cold, yet my forehead was burning, and a strange metallic taste had settled at the back of my throat, tasting faintly of copper and rusted iron. I assumed I was simply coming down with a summer flu, aggravated by the stagnant, humid air of the room. To verify the power distribution across the grid, I clicked on the Active Directory labeled Fusebox Schematics.
The work was slow. As I analyzed the voltage logs, the digital signal meters on my screen began to fluctuate erratically, the numbers jumping up and down before the entire system violently glitched. Suddenly, the fluorescent lights overhead didn't just flicker, they died completely. The mechanical hum of the washing machine ceased, the sudden silence rushing into the room with a suffocating, heavy weight. The bright, sterile laundry room was instantly plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness, save for the pale blue light of my laptop screen and the occasional flash of lightning through the plate glass storefront windows. Outside, the storm had finally knocked out the local power grid. I let out a heavy sigh, my chest tight. I reached into my tool bag, pulled out a high-powered tactical flashlight and clicked it on. The intense white beam cut through the dark room, illuminating the rows of silent, empty metal machines. To restore power to my diagnostic equipment, I needed to access the main service panel, which was located in the building's subterranean utility basement. I walked to the rear of the facility, pushing open the heavy, fire-rated metal door that led to the basement stairs. The air that rushed up from the dark stairwell was freezing, smelling of damp soil, rotting wood, and a sharp chemical sweetness that made my stomach turn. I descended the creaking wooden steps slowly, my flashlight beam bouncing off the rough, hand-carved stone walls. The basement of Spin Cycle Express was ancient, a remnant of the historical brick warehouse that had stood on this site a century ago. Unlike the clean concrete of the laundromat above, the floor down here was nothing but hard-packed black dirt. I reached the bottom of the stairs, my boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. I shivered, the cold air biting through my thin work shirt. My fever was worsening, my hands were shaking so violently I could barely keep the flashlight steady, and the veins on the back of my wrists had begun to darken, standing out against my pale skin like thin black threads. I walked toward the far corner of the basement where the heavy iron fuse box was mounted to the stone wall. I opened the metal door of the panel and held the flashlight between my teeth, freeing my hands to adjust the heavy copper breakers. I opened the digital diagnostic file on my phone, titled Service Technician Dispatch Log, to verify the wiring schematic. The screen of my phone glowed in the dark, but the software refused to load the schematic. Instead, the interface glitched, the green lines of text dissolving into a bright flashing red dialog box that filled the entire screen. The text on the screen read, "Biohazard Alert Monitor." Lines of automated forensic data began to scroll down the display at high speed, updating the local environmental status. Pathogen detection active. Organic anomaly localized. Perimeter quarantine engaged. Subject health profile minimal. Incubation phase 99%.
I stared at the blinking text, my brow furrowing in confusion. This was a commercial maintenance application, not a biohazard scanner. The property manager must have installed a buggy, third-party security suite that was misidentifying the building's damp mold levels as a biological hazard. I tried to force close the app, but my fingers were growing increasingly stiff, my joints aching with a deep, crushing pain that made every movement an exhausting effort. I turned away from the fuse box, shining my flashlight beam across the dirt floor to find a dry crate to sit on while I gathered my strength. But as the white light swept across the ground near the ancient brick foundations of the building, my breath caught in my throat. In the far corner of the cellar, right behind the rusted metal frame of the decommissioned boiler, the black dirt had been violently disturbed. A massive rectangular section of the ground had been dug out, the earth piled in neat, dark mounds on either side of a deep, yawning trench. The trench was exactly 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, 6 feet deep. It was a freshly dug, empty grave. My heart did a sudden, violent flip against my ribs. I stumbled toward the edge of the pit, my flashlight beam shaking erratically as I peered down into the dark, cold hole. The dirt inside was damp, smelling heavily of ancient rot, copper, and fresh clay. But it wasn't just the empty grave that made my vision tunnel. Resting at the head of the trench, pressed firmly into the dark mounds of earth, was a cracked gray stone slab. It was an old foundation brick, but someone had used a rusted metal chisel to carve words into the rough surface.
I leaned closer, holding my breath, the cold air forming a thick white plume in the flashlight beam. The carved text on the stone read, Lucas Thompson, born October 12, 1993, returned tonight. I backed away from the grave, my boots slipping on the loose dirt. My chest was heaving, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps that felt like glass sliding down my throat. "This is a joke," I whispered, my voice sounding flat and tiny in the dark stone cellar. "Someone is playing a prank on me. The property manager. They set this up." I turned back toward the stairs, desperate to escape the freezing vault of the basement. I didn't care about the breakers or the electrical fault anymore. I just wanted to get to my truck and drive to a hospital. The fever was driving me mad, making me see things that couldn't possibly exist. I reached the bottom of the wooden stairs and grabbed the handrail. But as my hand closed around the wood, my phone vibrated violently in my pocket. I pulled it out, the screen lighting up with a push notification from the laundromat administrative portal. It was a text message sent from the building's automated security network. I tapped the screen, my hand shaking so hard the phone almost slipped from my numb fingers. The message read, "Lucas, thank you for completing the maintenance loop. The containment sequence has been initiated. Please do not attempt to return to the surface level. The air filtration system in the main facility is strictly isolated." "No," I gasped, shaking my head violently. I scrambled up the wooden steps, my joints popping and clicking with a dry wooden sound that seemed to echo inside my own ears. I reached the top of the stairs and threw my weight against the heavy metal security door. Locked. The electronic keypad next to the frame was glowing with a solid, mocking red light. The property manager had remotely engaged the building's emergency quarantine lockdown, sealing the heavy fire door firmly into the steel frame. "Hey!" I screamed, hammering my fists against the cold metal of the door. "Open the door! I'm trapped down here!" My voice was swallowed instantly by the thick stone walls and the heavy insulation of the door. There was no echo, just a flat, dead sound. I pressed my ear against the cold metal, holding my breath. Through the steel, I expected to hear the sound of the storm outside. Instead, I heard a sound inside my own chest. It was a wet, heavy, rhythmic clicking. It sounded exactly like a throat trying to swallow fluid, accompanied by the rapid, frantic thrumming of my own pulse. But the rhythm was wrong. It was too fast, too frantic, sounding less like a human heartbeat and more like the rapid scratching of a giant insect trying to claw its way out of its shell. I backed away from the door, my flashlight beam catching my reflection in the small, wire-reinforced glass window of the security door. My face was completely unrecognizable. My skin had turned a sickly, translucent yellow, stretched so tightly over my skull that my teeth were exposed in a permanent, dry snarl. My eyes were no longer white. The sclera had filled with a thick, weeping black fluid that drank the light from my flashlight beam, leaving only 2 tiny pinpricks of pale light burning in the center of my pupils. The fever wasn't a sickness. It was an incubation. Suddenly, like a dam bursting behind my eyes, my consciousness fractured. The stone basement, the empty grave, the smell of damp earth, it all began to pixelate, the edges of the room dissolving into a dark, static-filled blur.
I didn't walk down the stairs today. I hadn't been working on the fuse box. I was already inside the grave. I was lying flat on my back in the cold, wet dirt of the trench behind the boiler, my body curled into a tight, desperate ball. The high-powered flashlight was not in my hand. It was the tiny, fading beam of my phone screen, slowly dying as the battery ran out. I tried to open my mouth to scream, but my jaw was locked tight, my throat dry and raw from hours of shouting into the dark. I tried to lift my hand to smash my shoulder against the clay walls of the pit, but my nervous system was entirely dead, frozen in the agonizing grip of the biological mutation. The silence of the subterranean grave was absolute. And then, from the edge of the pit, a hand reached down. It was a pale, skeletal hand, its leathery fingers draped in the tattered remains of a dark blue technician's uniform. The tiny pinpricks of pale light in its hollow eye sockets flared through the dark cellar. It leaned close to the dirt trench, its dry mouth opening to whisper a single raspy word that vibrated directly through the soil beneath my head. Mine. The creature did not strike. It did not reach down to pull me out. Instead, it slowly, fluidly collapsed forward, its physical form dissolving into a dark, swirling shadow that flowed directly through the damp clay of the grave, entering my open eyes. I felt a sudden, violent surge of heat rush through my veins, followed by an icy, suffocating numbness that settled into my brain, silencing the frantic rhythm of my thoughts. And then, my right hand twitched. My fingers, which had been frozen in lead for hours, slowly, deliberately uncurled. My arms raised, reaching out to grab the edge of the dirt trench from the inside. And as my body slowly dragged itself out of the grave, letting the cold, damp air of the cellar rush into my newly formed lungs, my mouth opened to whisper a single wet word in a voice that was no longer mine. Home. Outside, the storm kept howling, a heavy, indifferent blanket burying the Spin Cycle Express in silence. And in the dark, the loop was finally complete.